The American Civil War is often remembered as a battle over slavery, blue versus gray, victory and defeat. But what if that story is incomplete? What if the war was not only fought on battlefields, but inside the very identity of the nation itself? In the early 1800s, America was already divided, long before the first shot was fired. By the middle of the 19th century, the United States was expanding rapidly, stretching from the Atlantic coastline toward the vast lands of the West. On the surface, the nation appeared confident and ambitious. Beneath that surface, however, deep contradictions were growing. Contradictions that would eventually tear the country apart. The Constitution had promised liberty, yet millions of people remained enslaved. Northern states were industrializing quickly, building factories, railroads, and cities powered by wage labor. Southern states, by contrast, relied heavily on agriculture, especially cotton, sustained by enslaved labor. These two economic systems were not just different, they were fundamentally incompatible. As new territories were added to the Union, a critical question followed each one. Would slavery be allowed or forbidden? Each decision shifted the balance of power in Congress, turning political compromise into a fragile, temporary solution. Laws meant to preserve unity instead exposed how divided the nation truly was. Ordinary Americans felt this tension in their daily lives. Farmers worried about land and livelihood. Factory workers faced harsh conditions and uncertain futures. Enslaved people lived under constant violence and control, while abolitionists in the North risked public backlash to challenge a system they believed was morally wrong. The country was not yet at war, but it was no longer at peace. Trust between states was eroding. Political debates grew sharper, angrier, and more personal. The idea of a shared national future began to fracture, replaced by fear, resentment, and suspicion. The United States stood at a crossroads. Compromise had held the nation together for decades, but the cracks were spreading and the pressure was becoming impossible to ignore. As these tensions intensified, a series of political decisions and unexpected events would push the nation closer to the edge, and soon the fragile balance would finally collapse. In 1854, a single law would ignite a firestorm across the United States. It promised to organize new territories, but instead it exposed the raw, unhealed wounds of the nation. Families, neighbors, even friends turned against each other. Violence erupted not in distant lands, but in the heart of America itself, and the nation would never be the same. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 aimed to resolve the contentious question of slavery in new territories. It allowed settlers to decide for themselves whether slavery would be permitted, a principle called popular sovereignty. On paper, it seemed democratic. In reality, it unleashed chaos. Northern abolitionists and Southern slaveholders poured into Kansas, each determined to sway the vote. Towns that had been quiet farmland became battlegrounds. Armed groups clashed in the streets. Homes were burned, crops destroyed, and innocent lives lost. Newspapers called it Bleeding Kansas, but it was more than a regional conflict. It was a warning of the violence that awaited the entire nation. Political structures began to crumble. The Whig Party, long a stabilizing force, disintegrated. New political movements emerged, most notably the Republican Party, founded on opposition to the expansion of slavery. Debates in Congress turned bitter, personal, and sometimes physical. Southern leaders accused the North of plotting to destroy their way of life. Northern leaders condemned the South for threatening liberty itself. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans felt the divide in every aspect of life. Families were split along ideological lines. Communities, once united by trade, religion, or shared heritage, now argued bitterly over morality, economy, and the very meaning of freedom. The nation's identity, already fragile, was fracturing further. The country was moving toward inevitable confrontation. Each skirmish, each political fight, each impassioned speech added fuel to the fire. It was no longer a distant possibility. The seeds of war were taking root. The sparks had been ignited in Kansas, but the true storm was still gathering. Soon, a single event would shatter the fragile peace completely, and the United States would be thrust into full-scale civil war. April 12, 1861, Fort Sumter. A single volley of cannon fire echoed across Charleston Harbor, signaling the end of compromise. In that instant, a nation that had survived decades of tension was thrown into chaos. Brothers faced brothers, neighbors became enemies, and the United States was plunged into a war that would test the very soul of the country. The attack on Fort Sumter marked the official beginning of the Civil War, but the storm had been brewing for decades. Southern states, feeling their way of life threatened by a Northern-dominated federal government, seceded one by one, forming the Confederate States of America. 11 states would eventually leave the Union, each claiming sovereignty and the right to preserve slavery. The North responded swiftly, calling for troops to preserve the Union. Volunteers from towns and cities across the northern states enlisted in large numbers, driven by duty, patriotism, and fear of the Union's collapse. Railroads became lifelines for moving armies, and towns transformed into temporary recruitment and training centers. Life for civilians changed almost overnight. Families waited anxiously for letters from loved ones, while women assumed roles in farms, businesses, and hospitals. The war touched every corner of society. Soldiers marched into battlefields that stretched for miles, facing conditions that were harsh, unpredictable, and deadly. Disease claimed more lives than bullets, and the psychological toll on communities was immense. Yet amid the destruction, moments of humanity emerged. Letters spoke of longing, hope, and small acts of kindness. Soldiers forged bonds that transcended rank or background. Communities tried desperately to maintain normalcy, celebrating small victories and clinging to news of survival. The war had begun in earnest, but the most decisive and bloodiest clashes were yet to come. Strategies would evolve, armies would grow, and the stakes would rise beyond anything the nation had imagined. The initial shock of war was only the beginning. As battles escalated and the human cost mounted, the very idea of what it meant to be an American would be redefined forever, and the choices made in the coming years would determine the future of the nation itself. 4 years of war left the United States battered, broken, and uncertain. Cities lay in ruins, families were shattered, and the question of freedom hung in the balance. But even amid the smoke and sorrow, a chance for transformation emerged. Could a nation torn apart by its own contradictions rise stronger from the ashes, or would the wounds never heal? By 1865, the Civil War had claimed over 600,000 lives. The Union had survived, but the cost was staggering. Entire regions of the South were devastated. Farms, factories, and infrastructure lay in ruins. Soldiers returned home to landscapes unrecognizable, while countless formerly enslaved people faced uncertainty in a world that had promised freedom but offered little guidance or protection. The Emancipation Proclamation and the eventual passage of the 13th Amendment formally ended slavery, but the path to equality was far from smooth. Newly freed African Americans sought to rebuild their lives, establish schools, and claim political rights, often facing violent resistance. Reconstruction efforts aimed to reunite the nation, rebuild economies, and integrate formerly enslaved populations into civic life, yet deep social, economic, and political tensions persisted. Northern and southern states had to find ways to coexist after years of hatred and bloodshed. Infrastructure projects, such as rebuilding railroads and cities, were vital for economic recovery. Political compromise became essential, even as debates over civil rights, representation, and state versus federal authority dominated discourse. Communities learned that peace required more than the absence of war. It demanded understanding, reconciliation, and justice. Despite the immense suffering, the Civil War reshaped the United States in fundamental ways. It affirmed the principle that the nation could not remain half free and half enslaved. It tested the limits of democracy, resilience, and human endurance, and it left a legacy that continues to influence American society, politics, and culture. The war had ended, but its lessons lingered. The United States emerged forever changed, a nation forced to confront its deepest flaws, yet given the opportunity to strive toward the ideals it had long proclaimed, but only now began to fully embrace. The story of the Civil War is not just about battles and politics. It is a story of transformation, struggle, and the enduring pursuit of a more just and unified nation. Its echoes remain alive in every corner of America today. What did you think of this video about American history? If you enjoyed it, we regularly upload many informative and knowledge-based videos on this channel, so please consider subscribing to stay connected with us. Thank you for watching the video until the end.